The music had barely faded when the cameras began flashing. The kind of flash that doesn't just light a room, it ignites a storm. Beverly Hills glittered that night, bathed in the warm gold glow of power, wealth, and vanity. Kris Jenner, Hollywood's most formidable matriarch, had just turned 70. But the celebration wasn't just a birthday, it was a declaration. A reminder that no matter how fast the entertainment world spins, Kris Jenner still decides who's in and who's out. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And that's when Meghan Markle appeared. She wasn't invited. She wasn't expected. Yet she walked into the venue with the kind of confidence only someone desperate enough to fake calm could muster. The murmurs began instantly. The whispers that roll through a crowd when everyone realizes something unscripted is about to happen. Cameras turned. Eyes followed. Meghan, radiant but rehearsed, approached Kris Jenner with a smile that looked polished to perfection. She leaned in for what she imagined would be a picture, one that could change everything. Kris Jenner didn't move. She didn't smile. She simply blinked, tilted her head, and delivered 5 words that stopped the music in everyone's mind. "I don't know you, honey." A hush, then laughter, then silence again. The kind of silence that screams louder than any headline ever could. The Duchess of Sussex, once the world's most talked about woman, had just been publicly dismissed by the queen of American pop culture. Why did Kris say that? Was it scripted? A misunderstanding? Or was it, as some insiders now claim, the final nail in Meghan's fragile Hollywood comeback? Because here's the thing. That single line didn't just ruin Meghan's night. It exposed something deeper. Something Hollywood has known for years, but never dared to say out loud. Meghan Markle is no longer welcome among the elite. But how did it all unravel so spectacularly? And what really happened in the moments after Kris uttered those words? Let's rewind for a second. Kris Jenner's 70th birthday wasn't just another A-list soiree. It was the kind of event where deals were sealed over champagne flutes, and power brokers traded smiles sharper than diamonds. The Kardashian-Jenner dynasty had transformed itself from reality TV spectacle to cultural royalty. Kim, Kylie, Khloe, Kendall, all present. Every major star, every billionaire mogul, every influencer worth a headline. The night was guarded tighter than a royal coronation. Invitations were encrypted, photographers vetted, guest lists confidential. And yet, somehow, Meghan Markle showed up. Sources say her team had been scheming for weeks. There had been whispers that Kris's party would draw not only the Kardashians, but also Oprah, Jeff Bezos, and even the Clooneys. Meghan's public image was faltering. Netflix projects uncertain, Archewell underperforming, the Sussex brand losing its luster. She needed a spark, something to reignite her relevance. A single photo with Kris Jenner could do just that. Imagine the headlines: 2 empires unite. Royal Duchess meets Hollywood matriarch. From Buckingham to Calabasas. It would be the ultimate rebranding moment. And Meghan knew it. But Kris Jenner is not a woman easily manipulated. In Hollywood, there are rules. Power flows quietly, invisibly, and you never crash a gate without permission. Meghan, of course, had already broken that rule once, when she married into the British monarchy. But this was different. Kris Jenner didn't just run a family, she ran a machine. Every image, every post, every appearance was choreographed for maximum control. Meghan walking in uninvited? That was chaos in heels. The plan was simple, according to one insider. Meghan would arrive coincidentally, approach Kris with a warm greeting, exchange a few polite words, and secure a brief photo op. The team would then release the picture strategically to the press, suggesting the 2 powerful women were now collaborating. It would give Meghan what she needed: instant legitimacy, the illusion of belonging again. But something went wrong. Kris spotted her first. She turned toward her publicist, whispered something, and straightened her jacket. Meghan approached, smile unwavering, the kind of smile that hides panic behind porcelain teeth. Cameras began to shift in her direction, paparazzi recognizing the brewing tension. Meghan reached out a hand. Kris didn't take it. Instead, she looked her up and down with a practiced smile that didn't touch her eyes. And then she said it, calmly, clearly, deliberately. "I don't know you, honey." The words hit like ice water. The cameras caught it. The crowd felt it. Meghan froze, unsure whether to laugh, respond, or pretend it hadn't happened. A few seconds of pure humiliation stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then she did what she'd been trained to do since her royal days. She smiled and stepped aside as if nothing had happened. But everyone in that room knew what they had just witnessed. Now here's where things get fascinating. The clip, just 5 seconds long, wasn't meant to surface. Yet by the next morning, it was everywhere. Someone leaked it. The lighting was dim, the audio grainy, but the moment was unmistakable. Kris's words were crisp. Meghan's face was readable even in the low glow. Disbelief, hurt, forced composure. The internet didn't hesitate. Hashtags trended within hours. Hashtag, I don't know you. Hashtag, Kris versus Meg. Hashtag, Hollywood says no. The memes were merciless. The TikToks even worse. But beneath the noise, something else was happening. Something far more strategic. Kris remained silent. No statements. No tweets. Not a single word from her camp. In Hollywood, silence is its own language. It's how you assert dominance without lifting a finger. Meghan, on the other hand, scrambled. Her team reached out to tabloids, attempting to reframe the incident as a miscommunication. Some claimed Kris didn't hear her. Others hinted the phrase was taken out of context. But the damage was already done. The most powerful woman in Hollywood had publicly disowned her. And the question everyone began asking was, why? Why would Kris Jenner, who's built her empire on calculated alliances, risk that kind of viral backlash? After all, a photo with Meghan could have brought massive publicity. So what made her draw the line? According to insiders close to Kris, it was all about control. Kris has always prided herself on being the architect of her world. She decides who's photographed beside her, who shares her spotlight, who rides her wave. Meghan, on the other hand, represented unpredictability, controversy, scandal, a woman whose every appearance came with baggage. In Kris's empire of precision, Meghan was chaos. And Kris Jenner doesn't do chaos. Behind the scenes, many Hollywood insiders had grown wary of Meghan's PR tactics, her alleged tendency to use others' fame for her own resurgence. She's transactional, one source claimed. Every move is about optics. And Kris could smell that from a mile away. Still, this wasn't just about a single encounter. This moment was symbolic. For years, Meghan had fought to prove she belonged among the elite, royal or Hollywood. Yet every time she reached the top of the ladder, someone kicked it out from under her. The palace had rejected her. The British press had vilified her. And now, even the Hollywood elite, the very circle she once called home, seemed to be closing ranks against her. Imagine what that must have felt like. To walk into a room believing you're reclaiming your narrative, only to realize you've become the story everyone's laughing about. Meghan reportedly left early that night. Witnesses describe her slipping out through a side exit, avoiding cameras, eyes down. But her humiliation wasn't over. Within hours, gossip outlets began piecing together her motives. Rumors circulated that Meghan had been calling Kris's team for weeks, requesting a meeting. Others claimed she had sent a personal gift, a luxury candle and handwritten note, that went unanswered. By the time she showed up, Kris had already decided how the night would play out. And it played out perfectly, for Kris. The next morning, Kris posted a single photo from her birthday on Instagram, a black and white shot of her surrounded by family, friends, and icons. The caption read, "Grateful for everyone who's been part of my journey." No mention of Meghan. No tag. No shade. Just quiet power. But the absence was loud. Too loud to ignore. For Meghan, that silence was devastating. In the days that followed, every news outlet dissected the incident. Some framed it as a misunderstanding, others as a calculated snub. But the subtext was clear. Meghan Markle had tried to re-enter Hollywood's inner circle, and Hollywood had slammed the door in her face. And yet, there's another layer, one the public never saw. Insiders claim that Kris's reaction wasn't just spontaneous. It was rooted in years of tension and gossip. Some allege that Meghan had once declined an invitation to collaborate with Kim Kardashian's Skims brand during her early post-royal days, deeming it beneath her Duchess image. That perceived arrogance, the story goes, lingered. So when Meghan came knocking again, this time needing Kris remembered. Power in Hollywood, like memory, never fades. Now picture this, Meghan at home, scrolling through headlines, watching the internet replay that moment on loop. I don't know you, honey. 5 words that undid years of branding, interviews, and image management. The Duchess turned influencer turned Hollywood outcast, facing yet another rejection, this time from the one woman whose approval could have saved her. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. This moment wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because what happened next behind closed doors would make this single humiliation look tame. PR wars were about to erupt. Friendships tested. Alliances broken. And Kris Jenner, the woman who built empires out of drama, had just found her next storyline. But Meghan? She was about to learn that in Hollywood, rejection doesn't just sting, it multiplies. And the first ripple of that storm began the moment she stepped out of that party, humiliated but unbroken. Because Meghan Markle had a plan. And if Kris thought she'd won, she was in for a surprise. The night was already legendary before the first glass of champagne was poured. The streets of Beverly Hills shimmered under the glow of 1,000 headlights as black SUVs lined up outside the Bel Air estate. Kris Jenner had transformed into a world of gold. The driveway, framed by towering white roses and flickering candles, wasn't just an entrance, it was a declaration. Every guest knew they were stepping into history, into a spectacle that blurred the line between celebration and coronation. Kris Jenner wasn't throwing a birthday party. She was hosting a power summit disguised as one. And the question that no one dared to ask aloud was this: who would dare to show up uninvited? The guest list was tighter than a royal vault. Oprah was rumored to attend. Kim Kardashian arrived in a custom Balenciaga gown dripping with crystals, her every move accompanied by the soft click of a dozen cameras. Kylie, radiant and strategic, came arm in arm with Timothée Chalamet, the internet's favorite prince. Even Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez made a grand appearance, exchanging air kisses and quiet smirks. Every face in that room represented an empire: money, media, fashion, politics. It wasn't just a party. It was an ecosystem of influence. But outside, on the other side of those marble gates, another black SUV had pulled up quietly, almost unnoticed. Inside sat Meghan Markle, staring out through the tinted glass at a sea of flashes and laughter she wasn't part of. She adjusted her diamond bracelet, checked her reflection in the mirror, and smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that comes from joy. It was armor. "Are you ready, ma'am?" her driver asked softly. Meghan exhaled slowly. It's now or never. You could almost feel the tension tighten the air around her. For weeks, she'd been fighting for this chance, to get inside, to be seen, to prove she still belonged among the most powerful women in the world. She told her team it would be quick, casual, harmless. Just a friendly hello, she'd said. But the truth? This night was her test. Her last bridge back to relevance. She stepped out of the car into the blinding flashes of paparazzi lenses. Heads turned. The crowd outside the gates buzzed. Is that? Wait, did she get an invite? Oh my God, that's Meghan. The murmurs rippled like electricity through the night air. Inside the venue, word spread fast. Meghan Markle was here. For Kris Jenner, it was the one surprise she hadn't planned for. Let's pause for a moment. Because this wasn't just any party. This was Kris Jenner's 70th. The woman who turned reality television into generational wealth was celebrating 7 decades of dominance. Every detail, from the gold-accented table settings to the designer dress code, was orchestrated to perfection. Even the champagne was branded with her initials, KJ. And yet, the one thing Kris hadn't scripted walked straight through her door, heels clicking like warning bells. Inside, Meghan's entrance felt cinematic. The guests parted slightly, unsure how to react. Some smiled out of politeness. Others averted their eyes. A few pulled out their phones. Meghan's gown shimmered under the chandeliers, a custom piece rumored to cost more than most people's cars. But beneath the glamour was a quiet urgency. She wasn't just here to celebrate. She was here to be seen. It's strange, isn't it? How one person can walk into a room full of light and still carry their own shadow. Meghan looked radiant, yes, but every step she took seemed to echo louder than it should, as if the floor itself were questioning her presence. Across the room, Kris noticed. Who let her in? She whispered to her assistant, not with anger, but with that sharp curiosity she's famous for. The kind of look that could strip a person down in seconds. Security confirmed she's on the list, but she wasn't on mine. Kris interrupted, her voice low, steady, and unmistakably controlled. Hollywood has an unspoken rule. You don't surprise Kris Jenner. But here was Meghan, walking directly toward her, smile unwavering. Cameras pivoted. The hum of conversation softened into an uneasy hush. Every pair of eyes shifted toward the two women as if anticipating a collision. Now, think about this moment, the sheer contrast. Kris Jenner, the architect of modern fame, and Meghan Markle, the woman who walked away from royalty only to chase a different kind of crown. One built on exposure, control, and public narrative. They were mirror images of ambition, but only one held the keys to the kingdom that night. Ms. Jenner, Meghan greeted, her voice poised, hand outstretched. So lovely to finally meet you. Kris's lips curved into what the tabloids later described as a polite half-smile. She looked Meghan up and down, her expression unreadable. And then, softly, she said the line that would explode across the internet within hours. I don't know you, honey. The crowd froze. There it was, 5 words that sliced through the glittering illusion of Hollywood hospitality. Meghan blinked, caught mid-smile, unsure whether to laugh or retreat. A few nervous chuckles rippled from nearby guests, but Kris didn't flinch. She turned slightly, placing her hand on Corey Gamble's arm, and continued her conversation with Oprah as if nothing had happened. For Meghan, that single moment felt like a public execution. And yet, here's where the irony twists the knife. Meghan had been warned. Days before the party, a source close to Kris's circle reportedly told Meghan's team that the event was family only. But Meghan insisted it would be fine. Kris and I share mutual friends, she'd said. She'll be happy to see me. Her team hesitated but ultimately gave in. After all, a successful photo op could mean redemption. But what Meghan didn't realize was that Kris had already heard everything she needed to know. The whispers, the opportunistic motives, the subtle manipulation. Kris's network is vast, and her intuition sharper than ever. She knew exactly why Meghan was coming. To use her. And Kris Jenner doesn't let anyone use her. Let's be clear, Kris's rejection wasn't about cruelty. It was about control. In a room full of billionaires and A-listers, every photo, every handshake, every word carries currency. Meghan's presence risked shifting the narrative. The Duchess had become synonymous with drama, lawsuits, scandals, accusations of betrayal. For Kris, whose brand thrives on strategic image management, that was poison. So she cut the connection, cleanly, publicly, permanently. What's fascinating is how the guests reacted. Some were shocked. Others nodded knowingly. Kim, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Khloe reportedly whispered, "Oh my God," while Kylie turned away to hide a smirk. The energy in the room shifted completely. Meghan, realizing she had no ally in sight, retreated toward the champagne bar, pretending to check her phone. One witness described the scene perfectly. It was like watching a red carpet turn into quicksand. Now, imagine being in Meghan's shoes. Once adored as the fresh, fearless Duchess who defied the crown, now standing in a room where her fame meant nothing. No one rushing for selfies. No one begging for quotes. Just the uncomfortable hum of indifference. For someone who built her brand on visibility, invisibility was the cruelest punishment of all. Still, Meghan wasn't about to give up that easily. Within minutes, her PR instincts kicked in. She posed near a floral display, hoping paparazzi outside might catch a glimpse. She chatted briefly with a stylist she recognized, making sure cameras saw her enjoying the night. But behind that polished performance, her mind was racing. She knew this moment could define her next chapter, if she could spin it right. Meanwhile, Kris carried on effortlessly, mingling with Oprah, taking photos with Kim and Kylie, and laughing as if nothing unusual had happened. That's her genius, turning chaos into background noise. To her, Meghan's presence wasn't a scandal. It was a sideshow. But outside that estate, another story was already forming. Someone, no one knows exactly who, had captured the exchange on video. A short clip, barely 5 seconds long. Kris's calm face. Meghan's frozen smile. The words, "I don't know you, honey," audible over the music. It would leak before sunrise. As the night drew on, the party glowed brighter. Fireworks, speeches, laughter, all celebrating Kris's triumphs. Meghan, however, quietly slipped out through a side exit, escorted by her driver. Her head was low, her face unreadable, her phone buzzing nonstop. Was it her team? The press? Or perhaps someone who had already seen the footage? That's the beauty and brutality of Hollywood. It never sleeps. And by morning, Kris's 5 words would ignite the entertainment world. But for now, in that quiet ride back home, Meghan stared out the window, lost in thought. Maybe she wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Maybe she told herself Kris had been cold, ungrateful, jealous even. Or maybe, deep down, she knew the truth. In Hollywood, fame doesn't buy belonging. Access does. And access has gatekeepers. Kris Jenner is one of them. So when Kris said, "I don't know you," it wasn't personal. It was a verdict. But what Meghan couldn't know then was that this rejection would ripple far beyond that night. Her team would scramble. The media would feast. And the Hollywood elite, those she once called friends, would quietly decide whose side they were on. Because in this town, reputation spreads faster than wildfire. And Meghan had just been burned by the hottest flame of them all. And yet, somewhere in the ashes of that humiliation, Meghan began plotting her next move. A move that would set off one of the most unexpected PR wars Hollywood had seen in years. The morning after Kris Jenner's 70th birthday, the headlines weren't about her milestone. They weren't about the glittering gowns, the billionaires, or the gold-trimmed decor. They were about 5 words. 5 perfectly delivered, impossibly cold words. "I don't know you, honey." The clip had spread faster than wildfire. On Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and Instagram. It had been reposted, dissected, slowed down, subtitled, and turned into memes within hours. But behind that viral moment, there was a story no one had told yet. A story that started long before Meghan Markle set foot inside that Bel Air estate. Because if you think Meghan just stumbled into that party, think again. This was no accident. It was a calculated move. A plan. A gate crash so deliberate it could have been scripted for television. And in a way, it was. Let's rewind 2 weeks before Kris Jenner's birthday. Inside a chic Montecito mansion, Meghan sat at her marble kitchen island surrounded by her inner circle, her new PR strategist, an image consultant, and a social media handler. On the table between them lay an iPad showing Kris Jenner's party teaser post. A glittering gold 70, black roses, and a caption that read, "The Queen of Calabasas is ready to celebrate with her kingdom." Meghan's eyes lingered on the phrase, "Queen of Calabasas." Her lips curled slightly. "Queen," she said, tasting the word. It had been years since anyone called her that. To the outside world, Meghan was still the Duchess of Sussex. But behind closed doors, that title had lost its magic. Deals had stalled, Hollywood's enthusiasm had cooled, and the same media that once obsessed over her every outfit had moved on. Her Netflix project was in limbo, Spotify had cut ties, and even former allies were going silent. In that moment, Kris Jenner's birthday looked less like a celebration and more like an opportunity. "Imagine the photos," her PR strategist said, leaning forward. "You and Kris, 2 powerful women. Different worlds, same influence." That image alone could flip the narrative overnight. Meghan nodded, her mind already spinning with possibilities. "A photo with Kris says I belong here. I'm not just a duchess. I'm an American success story." That's what we need to remind them. It wasn't just about a photo. It was about survival. But there was one problem. Kris Jenner hadn't invited her. Meghan's strategist hesitated before saying it out loud. "We checked. You're not on the official guest list." Meghan frowned. "That doesn't mean I'm not welcome." The room went quiet. She took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes distant. She'd been here before, on the edge of rejection, one calculated risk away from turning her narrative around. Back in her acting days, she'd learned that sometimes you didn't wait for the door to open. You pushed through it. "I'll find a way in," she finally said. And that's exactly what she did. Over the next few days, Meghan began working her network. Calls were made. Texts were sent. She reached out to Marcus Anderson, the Soho House executive known for connecting elites. Marcus was her longtime friend, the man who had allegedly introduced her to Prince Harry years earlier. If anyone could find a loophole, it was him. According to one insider, Meghan asked Marcus if he could help her make an appearance at Kris's event. "Not as a guest," she clarified, "just a friend dropping by." Marcus was hesitant. Kris's guest list was locked tight, and the event's PR manager was notorious for turning away even minor celebrities if their names weren't verified. But Meghan was persuasive. "It's just a friendly visit," she insisted. "Kris and I have so much in common. Mothers, businesswomen, survivors of the spotlight. She'll understand." The pitch sounded innocent enough. But make no mistake, Meghan wasn't coming for a chat. She was coming for a photo. In Hollywood, a single photo can change everything. It can rewrite a narrative, revive a career, or bury a scandal. And for Meghan, a smiling shot beside Kris would symbolize rebirth. The Duchess of Sussex, embraced by America's most powerful woman. It would dominate every tabloid cover from London to Los Angeles. Marcus eventually made a call. Through a mutual acquaintance, someone loosely connected to Kris's event team, he secured a way in. Technically, Meghan wouldn't be an invited guest, but she could enter under media accompaniment. It was a loophole, and Meghan was about to exploit it. On the night of the party, everything was timed with precision. Her arrival wasn't random. It was planned to perfection. She waited until most guests had already arrived, ensuring the press was fully gathered outside. Her stylist had chosen a champagne-toned gown designed to shimmer under flashbulbs, soft, elegant, and strategic. Not too royal, not too Hollywood. Just enough to look in place. But behind that polished look was a woman stepping into enemy territory. Her team briefed her in the car. Smile naturally, engage warmly, but don't force it, one of them said. If Kris seems distant, give her space. You'll know when the cameras are ready. The entire operation sounded less like a casual outing and more like a covert mission. And in a sense, it was. Because while Meghan's goal was visibility, Kris Jenner's goal was control. And control was the one thing Meghan couldn't take from her. When Meghan's SUV rolled up to the gate, the security guard checked his list. Her name wasn't there. But her handler, holding a clipboard, confidently announced, "Press liaison, +1." It was bold, risky, but in the chaos of high-profile arrivals, the guard didn't question it. The gates opened. Meghan exhaled. She was in. Inside, the scene glittered with money and influence. Champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and the air hummed with the subtle tension of competing fame. Meghan paused near the entrance, scanning the crowd. She recognized a few familiar faces, people she'd met at charity galas, producers she'd pitched to, influencers she'd once followed online. But none approached her. It was as if she were invisible. Still, she walked forward, her head high, her smile unwavering. She spotted Kris across the room, flanked by Oprah, Kim, and Corey. Cameras hovered nearby, waiting for the perfect angle. This was it. The moment her team had built toward. As she began walking in Kris's direction, her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from her PR manager. "Make sure you're in the same frame. Smile. Let her lead." Meghan didn't reply. Her pulse was already racing. She rehearsed the words in her head. "So wonderful to finally meet you. Casual. Confident. Kind." She'd done this 1,000 times. Controlled the moment, guided the narrative. But tonight, she wasn't the director. She was walking into someone else's movie. And Kris Jenner doesn't take direction from anyone. From across the room, Kris had already been alerted. Her assistant whispered in her ear. Kris's brow lifted slightly, a mix of irritation and disbelief. She glanced toward the entrance and saw Meghan's familiar face making its way through the crowd. "Why is she here?" she asked quietly. "She came with media credentials, I think," her assistant replied. Kris didn't respond immediately. She took a sip of her champagne, composed her expression, and watched. To an outsider, she looked calm. But those who knew her could sense it. Kris was calculating, assessing. What was Meghan's angle? What did she want? And more importantly, who had let her in? As Meghan reached her, cameras began flashing. The tension was electric. You could almost feel the collective inhale of every guest waiting to see what would happen next. Meghan smiled brightly. Kris stared, unmoving. "The rest you already know. I don't know you, honey." The phrase wasn't improvised. It was precise, delivered with the practiced charm of someone who's mastered the art of public shade. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. She simply ended the interaction before it could even begin. And just like that, Meghan's carefully constructed plan collapsed. But what no one realized was that the gate crash didn't end at the party. It continued long after. Because once the video leaked, the PR battle began. Meghan's team scrambled to control the fallout. Her spokesperson contacted entertainment outlets, spinning the story as a harmless misunderstanding. Kris, of course, said nothing. That silence was devastating. Kris's restraint made Meghan look desperate. Every attempt to explain seemed like damage control. Every denial only amplified the humiliation. It was the same pattern Meghan had lived through before. Every time she tried to reclaim her image, someone else controlled the narrative first. But here's where it gets darker. Behind closed doors, Hollywood insiders started whispering about the stunt. Some called it brilliant but reckless. Others said it confirmed what many already suspected, that Meghan was becoming radioactive in elite circles. The industry has a term for it: social overreach. It's when someone tries too hard to climb back into relevance, and instead, they fall further. Meghan's name began appearing on soft no lists, Hollywood's quiet blacklist for people who bring chaos instead of value. Event planners were instructed to avoid unnecessary drama. Invitations quietly disappeared. The gate crash had worked, but not in Meghan's favor. And the most painful part? She had done it all herself. Still, even in defeat, Meghan's mind didn't stop. She wasn't going to fade quietly. "They'll talk about me," she told a friend days later. "They'll make jokes, but I'll turn this into a story, and I'll tell it my way." Because that's what Meghan always does. When she's backed into a corner, she finds the camera. When she's silenced, she finds a microphone. And when the world rejects her, she builds a new one around her. But this time, her new world was about to collide head-on with Kris Jenner's empire of control. And once those two forces met, Hollywood wouldn't stay quiet. Because behind the glitz, behind the viral clip, a war was brewing. A war not just for reputation, but for narrative dominance. It happened in less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would replay endlessly on phones, talk shows, and social media for weeks to come. 10 seconds that turned an evening of champagne and smiles into a moment of unfiltered humiliation. 10 seconds that changed Meghan Markle's entire Hollywood narrative. Imagine it. The ballroom glowed gold, the air thick with perfume and privilege. Laughter floated across the room like music, the kind only the powerful can afford to make. Then came silence, a kind of stillness that doesn't belong at a party. Every head slowly turned toward the scene unfolding near the marble staircase. There she was, Meghan Markle. Confident, composed, rehearsed. A duchess in exile turned Hollywood hopeful. Her gown sparkled, but her expression was that of a woman walking a tightrope. Each step was measured, poised, calculated. And standing at the center of the room, bathed in light like a queen at her own coronation, was Kris Jenner. The cameras shifted in her direction as if guided by instinct. This was what they lived for. A moment of tension, of drama, of history unfolding in real time. Meghan approached with a perfect smile, the kind that hides fear behind professionalism. Her right hand gently brushed her hair back, her shoulders relaxed, her voice ready to deliver a line she'd practiced all week. "Ms. Jenner, it's such an honor to meet you," she said softly, extending her hand. "I've admired your work for years." Kris didn't move. At first, the crowd assumed it was a pause, a beat before the polite handshake, the practiced laugh, the social choreography. But the pause stretched longer than expected. Kris's expression didn't change. Her lips curled into something resembling a smile. But her eyes, those famously unflinching, calculating eyes, stayed cool and unreadable. Then came the words, "I don't know you, honey." The tone wasn't cruel. It was casual, almost warm, but it cut deeper than ice. The crowd froze. For a split second, no one breathed. You could practically hear the sound of Meghan's confidence cracking. Kris turned back to her conversation with Oprah, her body angled slightly away, a silent dismissal more powerful than any public statement. Meghan stood there, smile still frozen, her hand suspended midair before she quickly dropped it. Her laugh, forced, brittle, filled the air, trying to turn the moment into a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The cameras had already caught it. 5 words. That's all it took to end her illusion of belonging. To most people watching the clip later, it was shocking, almost unbelievable. How could Kris Jenner, Hollywood's ultimate hostess, publicly embarrass someone like that? But to those in the room, it wasn't a surprise. It was a message, a coded declaration that Hollywood insiders understood immediately. Kris Jenner had drawn a line. Meghan took a deep breath and stepped back. Of course," she murmured, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "We'll talk later." But Kris didn't respond. She kept her focus on the conversation, her posture impeccable, her control absolute. The humiliation settled like fog. Nearby, Kim Kardashian exchanged a knowing glance with Khloe. Kylie whispered something into Timothy's ear, covering her mouth to hide a grin. Oprah, ever the diplomat, glanced briefly at Meghan with an expression that said it all. Sympathy wrapped in distance. Even the waitstaff avoided eye contact. It was as though the universe had turned its back. But here's the truth few realized. Kris's words weren't spontaneous. They were intentional. Days earlier, Kris's assistant had informed her that Meghan was trying to get into the event. She says she's just dropping by, the assistant had said cautiously. Kris's response had been immediate. If she shows up, she's not to be photographed with me. She didn't elaborate, didn't raise her voice, just made it clear that this was non-negotiable. To Kris, it wasn't about cruelty. It was about preservation. Her empire was built on discipline, strategy, and control. She couldn't afford chaos. And Meghan Markle, in Kris's mind, was chaos. Still, Kris hadn't expected Meghan to actually make it past security. So when she appeared in front of her, all charm and glitter, Kris reacted on instinct. The instinct of someone who spent decades surviving in a world that devours the weak. She neutralized the threat with one line, delivered sweetly enough to sting twice as hard. And that's what made it brilliant. The moment spread like wildfire because it felt raw, unscripted, real. Viewers saw authenticity, the very thing Meghan's critics said she lacked. The irony was brutal. In a single phrase, Kris had achieved what Meghan had spent years trying to manufacture: viral attention without losing control of her image. Back in the ballroom, Meghan tried to recover. She smiled, laughed at something no one had said, adjusted her clutch. A few sympathetic guests approached her, offering polite conversation, but the damage was irreversible. Every movement she made felt amplified, scrutinized. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was the evening's spectacle. One insider described it perfectly. You could see the mask crack. She was trying to hold it together, but her eyes said everything. After a few minutes, Meghan retreated to the far side of the room, pretending to admire the decor. She ordered champagne she'd barely touched. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. Messages from her team asking if she'd gotten the photo. She didn't reply. What photo? The one where she stood alone, humiliated? But Meghan wasn't the only one thinking strategically that night. Kris knew exactly what had happened and how it would play out. She'd been in this business too long to underestimate the power of perception. She didn't need to say another word. The internet would handle the rest. Every gossip outlet, every influencer, every late-night comedian would do her work for her. And they did. By midnight, someone had leaked a short clip from the party. The quality was grainy, the lighting dim, but the sound was unmistakable. Kris's voice, clear, calm, cutting. "I don't know you, honey." The clip hit social media like an explosion. Within an hour, it had been viewed over 1 million times. Comment sections lit up. "Kris is savage. Queen behavior. That's how you handle clout chasers." Memes flooded Twitter. One popular post showed Meghan's face photoshopped into a "Do Not Enter" sign outside Calabasas. Another edited Kris's voice into a remix. "I don't know you, honey," pulsing to a trap beat. It was cruel, it was viral, and it was unstoppable. But Meghan didn't laugh. Behind her Montecito mansion's glass walls, she watched the video in silence. Again and again, the humiliation replayed on loop. Every replay a reminder of how fragile her carefully rebuilt image had become. And yet, this wasn't the first time she'd been here. She'd survived worse. The British tabloids, the royal family, the world's collective judgment. She told herself she'd get through this too. She'd spin it, shape it, control it. "They always twist things," she muttered under her breath. "But I'll tell my side." But her PR team knew this was different. One of them said quietly during a crisis call, "This isn't just bad press. This is symbolic. You didn't just get rejected. You got rejected by Kris Jenner, the gatekeeper of American fame." That was the part Meghan couldn't shake. The symbolism, the echo of her past. Years ago, it had been Buckingham Palace closing its doors. Now it was Hollywood. Two worlds she'd fought to conquer, and both had turned her away with eerily similar words. In the palace, it was, "You're not one of us." In Calabasas, it was, "I don't know you." Different voices, same message. It hit her somewhere deep. The realization that no amount of PR polish, no curated interviews or sympathy-driven documentaries could buy genuine acceptance. She tried to reinvent herself, royal victim, humanitarian, producer, mogul, but to the people who ran Hollywood, she was still an outsider, a disruptor, a woman they didn't know and didn't trust. And Kris Jenner's rejection made that truth visible to everyone. Meanwhile, Kris's camp stayed silent. Reporters reached out for comment. No comment, her representative said smoothly. Kris had a wonderful evening with family and friends. That was all. No defense, no explanation. The silence wasn't accidental, it was strategy. In PR terms, silence is dominance. It keeps the spotlight where you want it. By staying quiet, Kris let the narrative shape itself. Meghan's desperation became the story. The press turned her into the punchline of the week, while Kris emerged untarnished, poised, powerful, untouchable. But here's where the irony deepens. While Kris's silence elevated her, it cornered Meghan. Every hour she stayed quiet, she looked more guilty, more desperate. Every time she tried to explain, she looked defensive. The internet doesn't reward sincerity, it rewards spectacle. And Meghan had just given them the biggest one of the year. Behind the scenes, though, something darker was brewing. Meghan's humiliation had awakened a fury she hadn't felt since her royal fallout. A sense of betrayal mixed with vengeance. They think they can humiliate me, she told a friend. They think they can define me again. They're wrong. Her tone wasn't defeated, it was dangerous. And that's what makes this story so compelling. Because Meghan wasn't just angry, she was plotting. She understood media better than most. She knew Kris's game, and she was preparing to play her own. The rejection wasn't the end of her story, it was the spark for her counterattack. But before Meghan could act, things were about to get worse. Because while she was licking her wounds in Montecito, the whispers had already begun spreading across Hollywood's private circles. Phone calls, text messages, private dinners, people asking the same question in hushed tones. Did you see what happened with Kris and Meghan? And from those whispers, something new would emerge. Something that would push this scandal far beyond one awkward encounter. The night of Kris Jenner's 70th birthday ended, but the fallout had only just begun. Meghan Markle had slipped out quietly, heels clicking against the marble floors as she retreated into the shadows of her car. Her carefully rehearsed smile had vanished, replaced by a cold awareness. She had been publicly dismissed, outmaneuvered, and humiliated. But she was not alone in feeling the tremors of that moment. Across Beverly Hills, in the exclusive circles of Hollywood power, whispers had begun spreading, soft, subtle, and deadly. This was the Whisper Network at work, the invisible system by which Hollywood communicates silently, efficiently, and sometimes ruthlessly. A name passes from mouth to ear. A comment, a look, a short clip sent discreetly. And before the public knows anything, reputations are reshaped, alliances recalibrated, and opportunities vanish. Kris Jenner understood this better than anyone. The same woman who turned reality TV into a multi-billion-dollar dynasty knew the power of silence and whispers. When she said, "I don't know you," in that room, she had already ensured the whispers would amplify her message. Meghan Markle was not one of them. Inside the ballroom that night, murmurs were already rippling. "Did you see that?" a stylist whispered to a producer. "She actually got rejected by Kris." Another guest leaned over and quietly asked, "Is Meghan really here?" Eyes darted, cameras adjusted, and the room's social balance subtly shifted. Even the seasoned paparazzi, who had witnessed countless celebrity spats, felt the tension. Hollywood operates like a living organism. Information flows in secret channels long before it hits the tabloids. By the next morning, Meghan's gate crash wasn't just gossip. It was an event that everyone in her professional network had discussed in hushed tones. Her PR team scrambled to interpret and control the damage. But controlling whispers is like trying to hold sand in your hand. One executive close to Kris's inner circle revealed, within 10 minutes, people were calling each other, asking, "Did Meghan actually approach Kris? Did Kris really say it?" And by midnight, everyone who mattered knew exactly what happened. The whispers didn't just travel horizontally, they moved vertically, too. Celebrities, producers, agents, and brand managers were all suddenly aware. This wasn't a simple rejection. It was a public statement about power, influence, and access. In Hollywood, the unspoken rule is clear. You don't overstep, and you never ignore gatekeepers. Meghan had done both, and the consequences were immediate. Inside Meghan's own camp, tension was mounting. Her PR team debated how to respond. "We need to spin this," one strategist said, pacing nervously. "Maybe frame it as a misunderstanding. Maybe Kris didn't see her. Maybe it was misinterpreted." Another consultant shook their head. "No, Kris Jenner's silence will do more damage than words. We need to control the narrative before the whispers turn into headlines." Meanwhile, the whispers were already turning into leaks. Someone with access to a hidden camera clip, someone inside the venue's security or media coordination team, had discreetly sent a 5-second video to a trusted outlet. It was enough, just enough, to validate the gossip and set social media ablaze. Within hours, Twitter exploded. #IDon'tKnowYou trended nationally. Memes flooded Instagram, and TikTok users turned the clip into viral remixes. Some juxtaposed Kris's calm, collected expression with Meghan's forced smile, the visual contrast making the moment irresistible. It was cruel, relentless, and utterly captivating. What made the Whisper Network so devastating wasn't just the spread of information, it was the subtle shaping of perception. Every retelling added a layer of interpretation, often unfavorable. By the time mainstream media covered it, the incident had already transformed from a brief interaction into a symbol of Meghan's declining influence in Hollywood. And the whispers didn't stop there. In private messaging groups and closed dinner parties, conversations began taking on a more strategic tone. Agents discussed whether signing Meghan to upcoming projects could damage their clients. Executives debated the optics of inviting her to future events. Influencers questioned whether featuring her on social media could compromise their brand. The message was clear. Meghan Markle was now considered unpredictable, risky, and socially toxic. The emotional impact on Meghan was profound. She had entered the party expecting a friendly encounter, a symbolic handshake, maybe a photo, and the validation she craved. Instead, she had been publicly denied, watched by the cameras, and then analyzed by the Whisper Network. Every attempt at composure had been scrutinized. Every smile had been dissected. Even her post-party appearances were now filtered through the prism of that moment. And yet, Meghan was no stranger to scrutiny. She had faced relentless media attacks, royal fallout, and a public divided between admiration and scorn. She had survived worse. But this humiliation was different. It wasn't tabloids. It wasn't paparazzi lying outside her home. This was the inner circle of Hollywood itself, the network of influence and control that could make or break careers in an instant. The Whisper Network is insidious because it operates on a social economy. Everyone knows everyone, and information carries value. A passing comment can translate into lost opportunities, canceled meetings, or exclusion from the most lucrative circles. For Meghan, the whispers had already begun to ripple outward, affecting brand negotiations, speaking engagements, and media partnerships. And all of it traced back to that brief, unforgettable interaction. Some insiders say Kris's choice to say nothing publicly was deliberate. By staying silent, she let the Whisper Network amplify her power. Every retelling of her words reinforced her dominance. Every subtle nod from Hollywood's inner circle confirmed her judgment. Meghan's PR team tried to respond, but responses are slow, deliberate, and easily dissected, whereas whispers move faster than any official statement could. By the time the world woke up the next day, the whispers had turned into headlines. Kris Jenner rejects Meghan Markle at star-studded birthday bash, read one outlet. Another reported, Duchess of Sussex publicly snubbed by Hollywood matriarch. Social media commentary reinforced the narrative. Kris is savage. Meghan tried too hard. Hollywood says no. Meghan, however, refused to be silent. She began reaching out to her inner circle, planning her next move. Calls were made, texts were sent, and strategies formulated. Her goal was to regain control before the whispers became an unassailable verdict on her Hollywood presence. Yet, even in her planning, she underestimated the Whisper Network's efficiency. Information travels faster than planning. Alliances shift before you can solidify them. And while Meghan plotted, Hollywood had already decided. Some would remain neutral. Others would quietly distance themselves. A few would even leak stories about her previous attempts to integrate with the elite, further fueling gossip. The Whisper Network operates like a predator, slow and subtle at first, then sudden and overwhelming. It had Meghan in its sights. And the more she tried to correct, the more whispers turned into rumors, rumors into narratives, and narratives into public judgment. By the end of the week, the event had taken on a life of its own. Meghan's brief attempt at visibility had become a cautionary tale. "Do not overreach," said the subtext of every story, meme, and conversation. Kris Jenner, meanwhile, remained above the noise, untouched, unbothered, untouchable. Her influence extended far beyond the room, far beyond the birthday party, reaching into every corner of Hollywood that mattered. And Meghan realized, too late, that the Whisper Network wasn't just gossip, it was power. But what Meghan didn't know was that some whispers had already turned into leaks with consequences far beyond social embarrassment. Because while Hollywood gossip had spread, someone had taken it one step further. Someone was ready to make the story explosive, irreversible, and unforgettable. And that's when the real PR storm began. The moment had passed, but the war had just begun. By the next morning, the world had already seen what Hollywood insiders had been whispering about all night. A short, grainy video clip had surfaced online, barely 5 seconds long, yet devastating enough to dominate social media for days. It showed Kris Jenner, poised and composed, standing with her back straight, eyes cold and calculating, as Meghan Markle approached with a practiced smile. And then, the words echoed across the internet. "I don't know you, honey." The clip was quickly shared, reposted, and dissected. Within hours, it had been slowed down, subtitled, memed, and remixed across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. The simplicity of Kris's dismissal, paired with Meghan's visible unease, made for content that the internet devoured eagerly. In a world obsessed with celebrity power dynamics, it was a goldmine. But how did the footage get out? That part remains a mystery, and insiders still debate the source. Some speculate it was a security camera operator, quietly amused by the tension. Others suggest a guest with media ties may have captured it clandestinely, recognizing its viral potential immediately. Whoever it was, the clip spread faster than anyone could have anticipated, making the private humiliation public in an instant. As the clip circulated, the reaction was swift and ruthless. Social media erupted with commentary, memes, and even remixes that turned Kris's words into a musical beat. Hashtags like hashtag I don't know you and hashtag Kris vs. Meg were trending within hours. Late-night hosts couldn't resist the juicy content. And in today's Hollywood rejection, one comedian quipped, "Meghan Markle learned the hard way. Kris Jenner doesn't do photo shoots for free." It was funny, cruel, and brutally viral. The impact wasn't just digital, it was deeply emotional. For Meghan, watching the clip replay was unbearable. According to sources, she repeatedly replayed it in private, each viewing a reminder of the humiliation she had endured. Every forced smile, every blink, every moment of hesitation was magnified. She had walked into the party expecting a friendly interaction, a symbolic photo, perhaps even validation. Instead, she had become the story, the punchline for the Hollywood elite. Meanwhile, Kris Jenner's camp remained silent, and that silence was deafening. In Hollywood, silence is a tool, a weapon, and Kris wielded it masterfully. By not commenting, she let the narrative shape itself. The public assumed what they wanted, that Meghan had been rejected, publicly and unequivocally. Every whisper, every speculation, every viral meme reinforced Kris's dominance. She didn't need to defend herself. The clip did it for her. Hollywood insiders noted that the clip's leak would have consequences far beyond embarrassment. Invitations to other events were quietly rescinded. Collaborations that might have included Meghan were paused or abandoned. Agents began to hesitate when discussing opportunities. In a town where perception is everything, being seen as difficult or unwelcome can end careers before they begin. For Meghan, the leaked footage was a turning point. Her carefully constructed narrative of poise, resilience, and strategic visibility had collapsed in front of millions. Every effort to maintain composure now appeared desperate. Every public statement, every appearance was now filtered through the lens of the clip. She was no longer just a duchess seeking validation. She was a cautionary tale for ambitious outsiders in Hollywood. Yet Meghan's team refused to remain passive. Within hours of the clip going viral, her PR strategists began contacting media outlets, attempting to reframe the narrative. It was a misunderstanding, one statement suggested. There was no hostility. Kris simply didn't see Meghan clearly. The spin was deliberate, but ultimately ineffective. Kris's words, brief and precise, spoke louder than any PR statement could. The clip's virality wasn't just a reflection of the words, it was the context. Hollywood thrives on spectacle, and this moment offered everything. Power, rejection, drama, and a clash between two ambitious women. Every frame told a story. Kris Jenner's calm authority versus Meghan Markle's forced composure. The social media world couldn't look away. But while the public consumed the footage with glee, the real drama unfolded behind the scenes. In the private corridors of Hollywood, the clip became a tool, a weapon, and a measuring stick. Executives discussed whether working with Meghan could damage their brands. Stylists debated if featuring her in campaigns was worth the risk. Influencers considered unfollowing or quietly removing her from collaborations. The leak had already begun to shift alliances and opportunities, a ripple effect extending far beyond the birthday party itself. Meghan, isolated in her Montecito home, watched the fallout with mounting frustration. Calls and texts from her team flooded in, each attempting to strategize damage control. She understood the viral nature of the moment, but controlling the narrative felt impossible. Every response seemed to backfire. Every clarification seemed to fuel further discussion. The clip had taken on a life of its own, independent of her intentions, her words, or her plans. Interestingly, the leak also revealed Hollywood's subtle hierarchy in a new light. While Meghan had sought to secure a foothold among the elite, the footage demonstrated clearly who held the real power. Kris Jenner's authority wasn't derived from fame alone. It came from influence, reputation, and the ability to dictate access. One simple phrase, delivered with precision, had reinforced a social order that Meghan had hoped to penetrate. Even weeks later, insiders claimed, the clip continued to shape interactions. Event invitations were rescinded quietly, projects paused indefinitely, and strategic partnerships were reconsidered. Hollywood's gatekeepers, who had witnessed the clip, seemed to treat it as a cautionary tale. Meghan had overstepped, and the consequences were clear. The psychological impact was equally profound. Meghan reportedly experienced moments of self-doubt, frustration, and anger, but also a renewed determination. She understood that to counter the clip's narrative, she would have to escalate her strategies, not retreat. The viral moment, as humiliating as it was, became a catalyst for her next moves. Moves that promised to turn a single rejection into a larger conflict within Hollywood circles. And yet, while Meghan strategized, Kris Jenner remained silent and unbothered. She allowed the clip to spread, the gossip to circulate, and the media to amplify her authority. Her silence communicated control, poise, and superiority. For anyone watching closely, the message was unmistakable. Kris Jenner not only dictates access to her events, she dictates the narrative itself. The leaked footage had done more than capture a moment. It had crystallized a battle of power, influence, and public perception. One woman, dismissed and humiliated, would now have to navigate a landscape defined by another's authority. The stakes were high. The world was watching. And Hollywood, ever hungry for spectacle, would not let the story fade quietly. But what Meghan didn't know at the time was that the clip was just the beginning. While she and her team scrambled to manage public perception, someone within Kris Jenner's circle was already planning the next move. Someone who would ensure that the narrative of rejection didn't just remain a fleeting viral moment, but escalated into a public spectacle that would reverberate across Hollywood for months to come. And the consequences for Meghan would be far more than embarrassment. They would strike at her professional credibility, her public image, and her ability to operate in the very circles she sought to re-enter. The leaked footage had gone viral, yes. But the true fallout, the strategic, behind-the-scenes fallout, was only beginning. And for Meghan, the moment of humiliation was about to become the spark of a Hollywood storm that no one could control. Because in the world of influence, power isn't just about what you say, it's about who decides if you matter. And that night, Kris Jenner reminded everyone, with 5 simple words, exactly who mattered. The question now, how would Meghan respond? The morning after the clip went viral, Meghan Markle's world had shifted overnight. What had been a carefully planned social maneuver, her stealthy attempt to gain validation from Kris Jenner, had spiraled into a full-blown PR crisis. Across social media, traditional media, and Hollywood's Whisper network, every headline, post, and meme told the same story. The Duchess of Sussex had been publicly rebuffed by one of the most powerful women in American entertainment. Meghan's PR team immediately went into emergency mode. Calls were made to entertainment outlets, tabloids, and high-profile journalists. Emails were drafted at lightning speed. Statements were rehearsed, reworded, and sent, but every attempt seemed to create more chaos than control. "It's a misunderstanding," one official statement read. Kris Jenner simply didn't see Meghan clearly. There was no hostility. Another suggested it was a moment taken out of context. But in Hollywood, context is everything, and this moment was clear as day. The footage had already told the story better than any press release could. 5 words, delivered with precision, had conveyed a rejection that no explanation could erase. Every attempt to spin the incident only made it worse. Tabloid editors and late-night hosts pounced on the statements with glee. Memes multiplied. Podcasts dissected the 5-second clip frame by frame, debating Meghan's body language, the placement of her hands, and the tilt of her smile. The PR messaging was drowned out by the viral force of the original footage. Behind the scenes, Meghan's advisors tried to calm the storm. They suggested controlled interviews, carefully staged photo opportunities, and public appearances designed to reshape the narrative. But the problem wasn't visibility, it was perception. The clip had painted Meghan as desperate, entitled, and tone-deaf to Hollywood's rules of engagement. Even her usual allies struggled to spin it in her favor. Inside her Montecito home, Meghan watched the chaos unfold. Her face, usually composed and confident, betrayed flashes of frustration and disbelief. Each new headline, each viral post, felt like a personal attack. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was a public indictment of her strategy, her reputation, and her influence. Her team scrambled, trying every tactic they knew. They offered off-the-record interviews to sympathetic outlets, claiming Meghan's presence at the party had been accidental. They highlighted her charitable work, her Hollywood achievements, and her previous connections with the Kardashian-Jenner circle. But the public had already decided what story to believe. Meghan had been snubbed, and Kris Jenner had emerged unscathed. Even private attempts to negotiate behind the scenes failed. Sources report that Meghan's team reached out to Kris's representatives, hoping to clarify the situation or request a private meeting. There was no response. Kris had made her choice, and she wasn't altering it for anyone. Silence, in this case, was more potent than a public rebuttal. The failed damage control had immediate consequences. Brand partnerships and collaborations that had been under discussion quietly stalled. Invitations to upcoming events and industry parties were rescinded or withheld. Hollywood insiders who had once entertained the idea of working with Meghan began to hesitate. She had become, in the eyes of some, a liability, a figure associated with chaos and controversy rather than opportunity and influence. This pattern wasn't new to Meghan. She had faced relentless scrutiny during her time in the British royal family, navigating a landscape of calculated judgment, constant monitoring, and hidden agendas. But in Hollywood, the rules were different, and the stakes were higher in subtle, insidious ways. Here, power was exercised quietly, invisibly, and sometimes mercilessly. One misstep, real or perceived, could alter the trajectory of a career overnight. Meghan's attempt at damage control exposed her vulnerability to the network she sought to penetrate. Every action she took was analyzed, critiqued, and ultimately weaponized. The viral clip became a measuring stick for her influence, or lack thereof. The more she tried to assert control, the more it seemed Hollywood pulled away. Meanwhile, Kris Jenner's camp continued to operate with precision. There were no statements, no clarifications, no defensive moves. They let the story unfold organically, confident in their authority. In Hollywood, the absence of a response can speak louder than any words, and Kris's silence was deafening. Every viral post, every meme, and every whisper reinforced the narrative of her dominance. Meghan's failed attempts at controlling the fallout only strengthened Kris's position. But the stakes were higher than simple embarrassment. Hollywood is as much about alliances as it is about visibility. Each failed attempt at damage control further isolated Meghan from potential collaborators, supporters, and allies. Friends who might have spoken up were hesitant, fearful of being associated with someone perceived as unstable or desperate. The ripple effects extended far beyond the party, impacting opportunities that Meghan had invested months, if not years, in cultivating. Even within her own inner circle, tension grew. Advisors and strategists debated how to proceed, weighing the potential for long-term damage against the need for immediate action. Some argued for a bold public statement, confronting Kris directly. Others advocated for subtle maneuvers, private meetings, and controlled appearances designed to rehabilitate her image. Yet every suggestion came with risk, and in the high-stakes world of Hollywood, risk could be fatal. The failure of damage control was not just professional, it was personal. Meghan's sense of agency had been challenged, her image publicly dissected, and her efforts to assert influence systematically undermined. The humiliation at Kris Jenner's party, now immortalized in a viral clip, became a constant reference point for those in her social orbit. It was a reminder that even carefully executed strategies could be undone by a single moment of